You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme, clamping down on climate change protesters. An injunction bans them from blocking the M25, while the Transport Secretary threatens them with prison. Two more energy companies go to the wall amid a warning that high gas prices may be here to stay. But is that such a bad thing for the environment? And China delivers undoubted good news. Its funding of coal-powered plants abroad is the stop. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. Now, the government has got tough with climate change protesters who've blocked parts of the M25 5 times over the past fortnight. Ministers have obtained a High Court injunction banning the demonstrations by Insulate Britain, and the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, has warned that anyone who chooses to flout the injunction risks possible imprisonment, as Ivor Bennett reports.
And you're willing to go to prison?
I am willing to go to prison.
First on the motorway, now at the Home Office. Climate activists are refusing to be silenced. An injunction sought by the Home Secretary has made Insulate Britain's M25 protests illegal. Next time they could be imprisoned, but the group is vowing to continue.
The injunction changes nothing. The injunction changes nothing. I've been very clear this is more important than my life. My children's future is more important than a bit of paper.
Britain's busiest motorway has been blocked 5 times in the last week by the activists who want the government to tackle climate change through better home insulation. Traffic's come to a standstill, and each time police have made multiple arrests.
We do not think it's acceptable to go and stand on a road. It's bloody dangerous. It's obviously inconvenient. It's also completely counterproductive.
But the group says it's not trying to please the public.
It seems like you're targeting the public, though, not the government, with your protests.
We are disrupting the public, we are disrupting the system to say, please, this system is killing us, it's not working for us.
The right to protest is clearly a fundamental part of a democracy, but the injunction on this group shows that right does come with conditions and caveats, particularly when the rights of others to go about their daily lives are affected.
Public disruption has become a hallmark of climate activism ever since Extinction Rebellion brought central London to a standstill in 2019. It wasn't a tactic deployed by Greenpeace with their flotilla on the Thames today, but they seem to agree that right now, anything goes.
The direct action has got a long history in this country of people taking peaceful direct action, and we are in an emergency. So I don't know the exact details, but I do know that protesters everywhere, including us, are calling on the government to act more quickly in the run-up to COP.
The closer we get to the climate summit, hosted in Glasgow in just 6 weeks, the calls for action will undoubtedly get more urgent, and the way they're conveyed may well get more extreme. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
Well, let's get the thoughts now of our climate change correspondent, ThomasPeter. So, Hannah, are we seeing a shift in the way that climate activists are trying to get heard? And will today's move by the government affect that, do you think?
Well, I think when you speak to Extinction Rebellion activists, and certainly as that report just showed, some of these Insulate Britain activists getting arrested, interacting with the justice system, potentially even going to prison, is sort of a badge of honour. And I think this specific injunction may well discourage people in the margins of that protest group from continuing, but it doesn't sound like it's going to have a huge impact on that group's philosophy and determination to keep going. I think more broadly, though, the interesting point that's been raised by Insulate Britain and its ongoing attempts to block the M25 motorway is that there has been a real shift away from winning the hearts and minds of people, of bringing the public along with them, towards maximum disruption, high-risk strategies that create a lot of noise. Extinction Rebellion has tweeted quite frequently in recent weeks, "We are not here to be liked." And I think now these protest groups in the UK are releasing themselves of the obligations to and the public and kind of the shackles of trying to be liked and creating a people's movement. I think it is right to assume that in the coming weeks before the climate summit, we are going to see more and more extreme tactics deployed.
Hannah, thank you. Now, two energy suppliers, Avro and Green Energy, have announced that they're to cease trading amid a continuing surge in gas prices. The two suppliers represent a share of nearly 3% of domestic customers. The head of the energy regulator, Ofgem, today warned that more suppliers are likely to go bust this winter and that the hike in prices may not be temporary. Well, that warning was echoed by the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng.
Price has spiked considerably. I've got a chart in front of me. I think it's quadrupled in the last 7 months. You would expect normally that the price would revert to the mean. It's not something that we think is going to be sustainable. But of course, Mr. Jones, we have to prepare for longer-term high prices.
Well, our business correspondent Helen Smith is in Westminster for us. So a warning today then that high gas prices could be here to stay, Helen. But could this prompt a new push to boost our renewables capacity?
Well, lots of energy analysts are saying that this crisis shows the need, if you like, to diversify our energy supply. There's been lots of focus in the last couple of days about how we in the UK get a lot of our natural gas from imports, about how we don't have a whole lot of storage here in the UK compared to our continental partners, and how that leaves us quite vulnerable. And I think lots of people accept that if we had a broader and more diverse energy supply and some of that, more of that came from renewables, that would broadly be a good thing. The reality of whether it actually changes either sort of industrial, business or government policy, I think is a completely different matter when it comes to businesses. Just surviving this crisis at the moment is clearly a very big problem for a lot of energy companies. We're just seeing a lot of them ceasing to trade, and the bigger ones who are more robust, they're having to take on hundreds of thousands of other customers from the ones that have collapsed. And at the moment, the price of wholesale gas is so high that actually balancing the books with all these customers, it's not necessarily certain they'll be able to do that without government intervention. So I think kind of putting a whole load more money right now into accelerating their drive to renewables, I think a little questionable. There could be legislative incentives, but again, the government talk a lot about their 10-point industrial green plan that they're proud of at the moment. So again, I'm not sure whether that will come right this second, but clearly the need to diversify is there.
Helen Ann, thank you. Well, gas prices have rocketed because of supply issues. So let me take you over to our data dashboard and have a look at the UK's real-time power mix here. And you can see that fossil fuels, of which gas, of course, makes up a huge part, are currently at 41%. We've got renewables at 44% and nuclear there at 15%. And the lack of wind recently has partly contributed to the spike in gas prices. But on what's been a fairly sunny and windy day today across much of the UK, that renewables figure was actually more like 50% in late afternoon, which is pretty good going for renewables. And just to let you know that later on in the show, we're going to be asking the climate justice activist Michaela Loach and the director of the climate think tank E3G, Tom Burke, whether the high gas prices could actually turn out to be a good thing. Well, in some of today's other climate news now, global sea levels are rising by 3.1 millimetres per year, and Arctic sea ice is declining at an alarming pace. That's according to the 5th Ocean State Report by the Copernicus Marine Service, which warns that climate change is creating unprecedented pressure on our oceans. The report also reveals how warmer ocean temperatures are causing invasive non-native species to migrate, disrupting ecosystems across the world. The southwest of the United States is in the grip of the most severe drought on record, and scientists have confirmed that climate change is making the situation worse. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Drought Task Force has found that over the 20-month period from January 2020 to August this year, the region received the lowest amount of rainfall since 1895. And a volcanic eruption on the Canary island of La Palma has now forced the evacuation of more than 6,000 people. Lava is slowly making its way towards the Atlantic Ocean and, as a result, could trigger landslides and produce clouds of toxic gas. Sky News is going to be reporting live throughout the evening from that island. Now, China has promised to stop funding new coal-powered projects in foreign countries in a move that could dramatically reduce the impact of fossil fuels. Now, the announcement was made by the country's president, Xi Jinping, in a pre-recorded message to the UN General Assembly.
We will strictly control coal-fired power generation projects. We will strictly limit the increase in coal consumption over the 14th five-year plan period and phase it down in the 15th five-year plan period.
Well, China currently funds over $50 billion worth of coal projects in 20 countries around the world. Now, along with Japan and South Korea, China's been responsible for more than 95% of all foreign financing for coal plants. But early this year, Japan and South Korea agreed to stop financing overseas coal projects. China's announcement to follow their lead could mean 40 gigawatts of planned coal-fired capacity in 20 developing countries could be cancelled. Now, that's the equivalent of the amount of coal that Germany produces each year. But President Xi's announcement doesn't cover China's domestic coal use, and the country uses a huge amount of the fossil fuel at home. Now, coal accounted for 58% of China's energy usage in 2019, and last year the country built around one large coal plant every single week. Now, China plans to be carbon neutral by 2060, and that's driving growth in the renewable sector, which grew by 4% in the first half of this year. Well, our China correspondent Tom Cheshire has been assessing just how important that pledge is.
This was a surprising but very significant announcement from President Xi Jinping. Effectively, according to one analyst, it ends financing for overseas coal projects. So that is a huge, huge deal. Now, it is possible to argue that some of that support for overseas coal financing had been going away. Projects linked to China had been having difficulty getting built because of environmental opposition, but also because the economics in a lot of cases weren't adding up compared to renewable energy. But whatever the case, this certainly puts the seal on it. Now that the highest leader of China says this won't be happening anymore, if it were to creep back, it doesn't seem like that is going to happen. So China really should be applauded for this step. I think focus, though, is going to turn away from the overseas coal financing to domestic use of coal. China still uses a huge, huge amount of coal, more than any other country, and as a result, it is still the world's biggest polluter. Now, it has said it will peak emissions by 2030, but experts say that is rather too late, especially to avoid the worst effects of climate change, and it still continues to add to that coal capacity. So I think that's what people are going to be asking next, especially ahead of COP, the big summit coming up. Will we see a dramatic pledge, a similarly dramatic pledge from Xi Jinping to look not just at overseas coal financing, but to look at how China uses coal and how it might curb it before the targets it's already announced?
Well, do stay with us. Coming up after the break, I'm going to be joined by climate justice activist Michaela Loach and Tom Burke, the founder and director of the climate think tank E3G. They're standing by, ready and waiting. And I'm going to be discussing with them whether China's announcement is a turning point for COP26 discussions and also whether higher gas prices could be a good thing for the climate.
So we are taking people to space in a very gentle way, right? I think when most of us think about space flight, we think about rockets and training and spacesuit, the right stuff. So we want to find a way to take people to space that's incredibly gentle so that we all feel that we can go to space. And so we're using a huge space balloon that is the size of a football field, taking a very comfortable pressurized capsule to space. And of course, you can have your beverage of choice on board. We have a bar and a loo, of course, and Wi-Fi. Our flight is 6 hours long. It takes you roughly 2 hours to get to space. You're going there at a blazing 12 miles an hour. Then you're going to be up at apogee at the top for 2 hours so that you can look out the windows, 360-degree panoramic view to have that incredible view of Earth in space that astronauts talk about. Like, it really moves them when they see that view. And then 2 hours down again. Ours costs $125,000 a piece. And there are, of course, other ways to get to space, which are vastly more expensive. So we're pretty excited that we are going to space, but we are able to really bring the cost down significantly already. And we're pretty excited about the uptake that we've had. The demand is huge. We put tickets on sale earlier this year in February. We've already sold over 450 tickets. So people really want to go to space. So this is truly the safe way to go to space. The space balloon that we are flying a pressurized capsule with has been used by NASA and others thousands of times. And so, of course, that has really tested the technology and put it through its paces. And then between the capsule and the balloon, there is, of course, a parachute, and it's a pre-deployed parachute. And this kind of system has been used also thousands of times and has never failed in all of that time. So it's an incredibly safe way to go to space. What's really fun is that we're seeing people buying up full capsules, so that which is 8 people and a pilot. And that way they can take their entire family, they can get a group of friends together to go. So it's really becoming a social event in space.
We don't understand that every lake or a pond is a habitat in itself, which houses frogs, snakes, crabs, turtles, birds, so many different life forms. Human beings directly depend on underground water source. So a lake or a pond is necessary to replenish these groundwater resources.
Did you know if we tried to use less energy, we could help reduce air pollution? What, like turning off the lights and stuff? Yeah.
Thursday brings us mixed weather conditions with an area of cloud across parts of Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia. That's going to push its way southwards. 1 or 2 spots of drizzle on that, and then another rain belt starts to work its way in from the north. Temperatures still on the high side for the time of year. We're looking at a high of around 23 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. In terms of air pollution, well, those changeable conditions do benefit us in terms of air quality. Pollution will be low right across the country.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Now we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day now with climate activist Michaela Loach and Tom Burke, chairman of the E3G think tank. So welcome to you. Nice to see you here this evening. And 2 good bits of climate news from the UN General Assembly this week for us to discuss. Joe Biden, as expected, upping the United States' commitment to funding climate action in the developing world. And then, in more of a surprise move, Xi Jinping saying that China would no longer finance coal projects abroad. And with just 40 days to go before COP26 in Glasgow, we're going to be asking, is this a turning point? So, Tom, I want to ask you, first of all, about these big announcements. Let's focus in on China, because I'm going to show everybody what the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said about the issue of coal. He said accelerating the global phase-out of coal is the single most important step in keeping the Paris Agreement's key warning limit within reach. So this announcement by China, is it a key breakthrough ahead of COP26?
I don't know that it's quite a breakthrough, but it's certainly a very important development, and it more so because it was a bit unexpected. And I think that's helped to change the tone of the conversation as we run in. It was getting to be a bit gloomy. And now I think, together with the Biden announcement, this announcement, particularly because of, as the Secretary General was saying, how important coal is, I think this has lifted the tone and begun to put a little bit of momentum into it. But I think it's a bit early to say it's an actual breakthrough.
OK, so to make it a breakthrough, would China have to say we're going to make the same announcement as far as our domestic coal production is concerned? Because they rely so much on it in the country, don't they?
I think that's exactly right. As Tom showed us just a minute ago, I think that really would be a breakthrough if they were to make the commitment to phase out coal with a deadline a little bit before 2060. Then I think we'd really be looking at something you could count as a breakthrough.
OK, Michaela, that's China. Let's talk about President Biden's announcement as well on climate finance, doubling finance to developing countries to $11 billion. I mean, climate finance has been a big sticking point. So does this give you some sense of positivity that climate justice can be achieved at COP?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to the United States, I am quite hesitant about celebrating a kind of a move from climate denial to climate delay, because what we actually need is climate action. And both climate denial and climate delay give us an unlivable future. And what we actually need is a livable future. And that means moving beyond this kind of bare minimum. They still haven't met the 100 billion target they need for this climate fund. And actually, that's not even enough, I think, if you consider how much of a part to play the United States and countries like the UK have had in the creation of this crisis and continuing to perpetuate so many emissions. I think what we actually need to hear in COP26 is have all of these nations listening to the countries that are most affected and the people who are most affected and indigenous leaders and all these people, and listening to what climate justice means for those people, rather than almost patting themselves on the back for doing what I see as almost less than the bare minimum.
And where does this leave us, do you think, then, Tom? I mean, COP21, the Paris Agreement was reached. It was deemed a huge success. Could the same happen for COP26 in November?
I think you need a different, a kind of different measure of success. What Paris was about was really trying to put together a global agreement to deal with the problem. I think what we're now looking at are the steps we have to take to implement that agreement. And this is a really important one of those steps. And I think Michaela is right to be a little bit cautious about what the Americans are saying about money. Okay. It's not the president of the United States that decides how much money America can give, but the US Congress. And that's a little bit less focused on climate justice than the president is. Okay. So I think that we mustn't raise our expectations too high for the COP. I think it's some real progress being made in the last few days. I think we've got to see some more in the interim period between now and the COP itself. So we need to be looking at the G20 meeting next month.
Very briefly, Michaela, can COP26 be a success? Does this bode well?
I think that's also a difficult question, because I think considering how many nations aren't even able to make it to the COP, how many indigenous leaders, how many of the most affected people and countries aren't being able to make it there, I find it difficult to know whether this will be the success that maybe we need it to be. It seems, especially from what Boris Johnson is saying, almost applauding himself and then using whataboutism and talking about China and India rather than the UK's huge emissions and their investment in fossil fuels, that it's going to be almost like all of these countries coming together to talk about how great they are rather than actually addressing the real harm that's being caused.
OK, lovely. I'm going to rush us on to the next subject because we're running out of time. And Sky News has been reporting on an energy supply crisis all week. Energy firms going out of business, rocketing prices. But in the context of climate change, are high gas prices a good thing? And Michaela, I'm just going to take a look at what Kwasi Kwarteng has said. Our exposure to volatile global gas prices underscores the importance there of a strong homegrown renewable energy sector. So what's bad for consumers now, Michaela? Could this be a good in terms of renewable energy and the planet?
I'm hesitant to say this is a good thing that is happening right now. But what I will say is it's bringing attention to the fact that gas is unsustainable financially, but also obviously for the planet. And what we actually need to be doing is moving towards a renewable economy that actually will be there for the future, is sustainable for the future, but also won't have these same fluctuations in prices and will be better for all of us.
But do we not need gas, Tom, to switch it on when wind lets us down or the sun lets us down?
We can develop an energy system that doesn't need gas at all. In fact, if what we'd done was what we could have done in insulating the leakiest homes in Europe and deploying the renewables that we've got faster, then what we'd have done, not only would we have driven people's bills down rather than putting them up, but we would have reduced our vulnerability to these kind of price spikes caused by international resource markets. So in a sense, the real signal from this is to get on with what we know we can do to reduce our vulnerability, both to the climate and to high energy prices.
It's a huge job, though, isn't it, Michaela? So many of our houses are powered by gas, aren't they?
Yeah, but I also think that there's a huge opportunity that we have here to realise the necessity and kind of immediacy of our need to invest in these renewables instead, and create a green economy where we don't have this reliance on such fragile industries as the gas industry. We know that this is a declining industry. We've known that for such a long time, and we need to be moving away from that. And I think that we can see this as an opportunity to really take that on board and actually mean that all of us can actually access energy that is not unstable, is sustainable, and is safe and better for all of us.
We must leave it there, but I can see you're dying to say something, Tom. Very in 10 seconds.
Yeah, Anna's right. Opportunity is a better driver of change than punishment.
OK, beautifully succinct. Tom Burke, Michaela Loach, we must leave it there. Thanks both very much indeed.
Thank you.
So we're out of time. Do stay tuned. Sky News Tonight coming up with Dermot, and I'll be back again tomorrow.